Howdy y'all, welcome back to the channel. Thank you for stopping by for part 2. I appreciate you being here. This is where we get to an absolutely bonkers part of the history of Toronto. If I made a joke that War of the Worlds happened for real and I showed you these images, you might think this was a Hollywood production. However, the following images are going to be from a furnace or elevator fire, which spread throughout the majority of the city of Toronto, destroying brick and masonry built structures for blocks on end, reducing them to mere rubble. The night was cold on April 19th, 1904. Toronto temperatures were roughly 25 degrees Fahrenheit that night, with bitter snow showers. In the elevator shaft, which was a rather luxurious invention at the time, of the E&S Curry Limited neckwear boutique, smoke began to bellow. This smoke was eventually noticed by the local Toronto authorities, but by this point it was too late, and much of the E&S Curry building was already engulfed in flames. All in all, the exact cause of the fire was never determined. However, within mere hours, 17 fire halls were attempting to contain the flames. The winds that night soared at 30 miles per hour, pushing the flames from building to building in the Toronto night sky. Firefighters from as far away as Buffalo, New York, arrived to fight the flames. The fire spread quickly. It took only 9 hours for much of the city of Toronto, all the old world history, all the architecture of the grandest stature to be reduced to rubble. By morning, the fire was contained. These photographs are some of the only known images depicting the aftermath. We can clearly see masonry-built buildings, cathedrals, post offices, and enormous unnamed or unmarked structures with building blocks as large as humans somehow being taken from their original glory and transformed into next to nothingness. We see a lot of debris, yes, but what we see even more, in my opinion, is confusion. The looks on the faces of those who remained in Toronto at the time of the fire are quite telling. So are the numbers. We are told that over 100 buildings were destroyed, causing over $8 million in 1904 US dollars in damages. It's hard to quantify just how bad or large the sum of damages was, but we're talking roughly $250 million adjusted for inflation. Just look at some of the photographs here. With destruction like this, the absolute decimation of nearly an entire city, one can only imagine how many must have lost their lives trying to avoid or fight this fire. Yet, there lies what might be the most surprising aspect of the 1904 Great Fire in Toronto. Only one person passed away as a result of the blaze, and this was said to be due to that person rushing back into the fire in hopes of fighting the flames. So, according to the current narrative we have, not one person in the city of Toronto was killed unexpectedly by this disastrous fire, as it rapidly and uncontrollably turned the old world city of Toronto into ash in less than 9 hours. We are also led to believe that every single person, besides one who ran back into the fire, was able to wake up in the middle of the night, escape the flames, and get themselves to safety. It's quite a tragic yet interesting tale, to say the least. Now, we can call it a coincidence, but as with many other old world cities that experienced great fires throughout the years, we are told that Toronto was rebuilt bigger, better, and faster than ever before. After basically all the original old world evidence was destroyed in the explosion at Fort York, we then have Toronto being rebuilt and again being basically completely destroyed in the Great Fire of 1904. So we have these new enormous structures that begin to pop up in Toronto following the explosion at Fort York, and then all of those new old world buildings are destroyed in the 1904 fire. You can see that we have two separate old world cities of York, at least according to the current narrative, and each one has these unique stories for how they were decimated. So in the remainder of this video, I tried to include images of the oldest buildings that remain in Toronto. Some of these will be from before the Great Fire in 1904, and some of these are going to be taken after the Great Fire in 1904. One thing you will notice is that there is really interesting architecture, no matter where you look in Toronto. And unlike many old world cities, which had periods of flux where there was a lot of development, and then they had periods where there wasn't so much development, and many cities, including Buffalo, for example, are sort of losing population and losing a lot of this old world nature. Toronto, on the other end, is actually growing more rapidly than really any other city in Canada, being Canada's largest city. So even in modern times, a lot of these old world buildings are, if they still remain in Toronto, hidden by many of the other skyscrapers and newer buildings that have been built in the city. But if you look into these photographs, you will find really interesting architecture, really amazing buildings, a whole lot of antiquitech, and stuff that I found really interesting, and I wanted to share these images with you. So basically, we're looking at old world Toronto. We have two unique resets which occurred in a large gap of time from one another. We have Fort York exploding and the town of York being destroyed. And then we have the Great Fire, and we have the rebuild that happened after the Great Fire of 1904. So two unique time periods of construction. And this construction was all occurring on the top of ancient remains from the Iroquois and the Huron native nations, which thrived in Toronto, and also included these native nations who built massive mounds and earthworks. So the construction of these old world cities, including Toronto, seems to be happening in cycles, so to speak, in the same cycles where we have a specific group of ancient native mound builders who essentially lay out the city, although they're not given credit for it. And then we have European settlers coming in, and then we have something that occurs which is said to destroy many of the old world buildings. In this case, in Toronto and York, it is said to be a fire, but it varies from old world city to old world city. Basically, what the current narrative tells us, though, is that what we see today is an amalgamation of all these different rebuilds. So what we're going to do now is just try and look at some of these most unique, interesting, and detailed photographs of Toronto from the late 1800s and the early 1900s. Sit back, relax, and let us look at these large handfuls of the absolutely most unique and oldest photographs of Toronto, Ontario, Canada. I'll chime back in with some details if I feel fit, but essentially the photographs here speak for themselves, and you as my audience and as a group probably notice more than I can as a single person. So I'd love to hear your ideas and anything that stands out to you in the comments down below. Feel free to leave a timestamp and point out the image that you find interesting, and we will discuss it. I look forward to hearing what you discover, and I hope that this unique collection was entertaining for you. With that being said, let us wrap up this video together by viewing the remaining 100 or so images I have of Old World, Toronto, Canada. Enjoy.